Hey, how are you guys? It is Harrison Barron from Growth Generators. Now, this video is a story about how a company decided not to buy IT services or MSP services, and it cost them $400,000. Now, this story is specifically designed to do a couple things. One, teach you and kind of show you how to sell IT services and MSP services, but two, also kind of give the customer an idea of what would happen if you don't end up hiring. It doesn't have to be your company, but any company. Getting help is the most important thing. So let's rewind a couple of years, and I was working for an MSP at the time, and we had a customer that I was trying to pitch IT services for. Now, they had, I want to say it was about 40, 50 computers. They needed a bunch of stuff. They needed a server rework. They needed offsite backup. They needed basically every computer to be brought up to speed with patches, updates, antivirus, the whole nine. I mean, like, it was a wet dream because it was just everything that they could possibly need. And we kept going back and forth with price, and price was a big issue for them. Now, I want to say I started up around the $8,000 to $7,000 mark, and they kept barking at the price, and I kept saying, fine, you know, look, I'll see if I can go any lower. And I really didn't want to go any lower because a lot of their stuff just hadn't been touched in years. And the other sad part is they had a lot of machines that ran specifically off computers. This company specifically was in the aerospace company. They would test different parts of planes, and they did a great job at it. They were growing like a weed, and they were doing really, really good. They had a huge customer base. Now, I can't go into more detail than that because I don't want to give it away, and I believe I signed an NDA at the time, so I'm going to keep it pretty vague in that area. Now, I had pitched the original, I want to say it was like $7,000 to $8,000. They said no. Came back, then it was like a solid $7,000. They said no. $6,500. They said no. $6,000. They said no. And I want to say, like, at the final number, it was like $5,500 a month. And I said, look, I can't go any lower than this. This is the absolute lowest. I don't want to go any lower. I'm not going to go back to the office and try to get you a lower price. I'm not going any lower. This is kind of the final offer here. And they said, you know what? This is a fair number. We're going to think about it. And I hate those words of we're going to think about it, because the we're going to think about it usually means probably a no. And I didn't really care if I got the deal or I didn't get the deal. And that's one of the first key things about sales. You have to be in a position where it doesn't matter if you get or you don't get the deal. Because if you can go from a place of you want the best for them instead of I want the paycheck coming after I close them, you will be infinitely, just your whole sales pitch is going to be better. Every time you speak to them is going to be better. They know that you're helping them based on the fact that you actually want to and believe that you can help them, instead of you're going to get a fat paycheck and walk away from the deal and somebody else is going to handle everything else afterwards. So they said, hey, you know what? We're going to think about it. We're going to think about it. Followed up with them. And I want to say it was about 3 weeks later. I followed up with them a couple times. Now, they always say you're supposed to follow up 7 times. I had already been there half a dozen times to go over and work with it. And they were only a couple miles away from the old company that I used to work for. They said no, they said no, they said no. And the issues just kept growing, and it was abundantly clear that this place just hadn't been touched in years as far as technology goes. Other than those handful of computers that they needed to run the machines, I mean, a lot of these computers were just super outdated, and even the server was probably close to 10 years old at the time. You could just go in there and you could smell the stagnation and not accustomed to change in the air. Now, the person that I was dealing with was very much in favor of, hey, I need IT support. We need to do something for the business, or we're going to be in a pickle at some point down the road, which I also agreed with. The upper management, the people that own the company, were the ones that were saying no, no, no. And he was saying, yes, we have to do something. We might not need the most expensive package, but at least we have to come in, have them deploy, get everything up to date, give us recommendations, the whole nine. Well, fast forward about a couple weeks later, I think it was all said and done since the last time I had been there, about a month, I get a phone call at, I want to say it was like 3 or 4 o'clock on a Friday, which you know that is the worst time. And it would say, hey, Harrison, I need you to come here immediately. Drop everything. I don't care what it is. I need you here right now. Now, I was kind of technical, but I was much more of a salesperson. I had come from the tech support, being that first level, and I was working on second level. The owner of the company at the time, realized that I was much better at sales, so I didn't really get too involved, but I could dive into a computer and look at things and understand what I was looking for as far as Active Directory or anything else important in that regard. I go over there and I see that there is a virus running rampant on the system. Immediately unplug the Ethernet cables, start to just do damage control of what I could do at the time. Now, I don't remember exactly what I did because it has been some years, but I remember saying this is the worst thing that could have ever happened on a Friday. you know, shut down the server immediately, shut down everything, pulled out power cables, I mean, the whole nine. It just had to bring the whole thing to a stop until we can assess the damage. Now, what happens after is the $400,000 part. Before I get into the $400,000 part, I want to share with you some of the things that him and I were speaking about at the time. He was like, wow, I really regret not signing up with you earlier. This was the biggest problem because all of this would have been avoided had we already had access to the system. We would have known immediately when there was a virus in the system. We would have been able to shut it down immediately or just tell the person, hey, your computer's infected, unplug it immediately, and we'll just take care of everything else. We'll go there in a few minutes. But the other problem it had been long enough just in that short little drive for that virus to start impacting the server, and he knew the damage that this was going to cost. He didn't know exactly to what extent it was going to be, and the guy that actually went onto it pulled up his personal email and saw, oh, I'm getting a package from FedEx. And this is what we used to tell, and I'm sure that you guys are telling all of your clients, do not bring a personal email into the workspace. Everything for work gets done on the work computer. Everything for personal use gets done on a separate network off of the work computers, because this is what happens. He saw he was getting a FedEx package. He clicked it, and it just started downloading the virus. He didn't even realize for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then things started to get a little wonky on his computer. So he mentioned it to his manager, who then brought it to the light of the person I was dealing with, and at that point, it had already been too late. It just had too much time to start processing, downloading data, the whole nine. Now, this virus in particular, I don't remember exactly what kind of virus it was, but it was not like a crypto locker where we needed to pay a Bitcoin, which would have been probably the dream scenario. If we paid the Bitcoin, it would have been great. We would have been a couple $1,000s out of the pocket, but it would have been resolved, and we would have been back into what we needed to do. The problem is multiple things. The computer that he was on had been on the entire time, and it was the last thing that they unplugged till I got there. The second problem is the server was so old that it had to go through a proper shutdown sequence, or we risked ruining the hard disk drives. Now, I'm not that technical. I don't know how true that is, but we couldn't, and I remember specifically, we could not just straight unplug it from the wall. It would have damaged the server, and the drives were even older than the server. They must have brought them over from the server that they had previously. So it was just all in all a really bad scenario. Now, this is the $400,000 part. I wanted to quote them at around $7,000. Now, they had about 40 or 50 computers. I don't remember. Don't quote me on that. But it was a pretty decent size account, right? It was like about $125 to $150 per computer. 50 computers, you do the math. It was pretty good. The problem is once that virus hit, we worked all weekend long to get that customer up and running. The problem is because of that server's age, it took over, I think it was like 48 hours of just pure labor building an entire new server, from the system to trying to save the drives to putting them, we didn't have to put them in a clean room or anything like that, but pulling all of the data off and then assessing all of the computers on the network before we could plug anything back into the network. It was miserable. The biggest problem that came out of it, and why it cost $400,000, was not our bill, although I would have loved the commission on a $400,000 check. The problem is it took about a week before they were at full capacity again. The first full 4 days, nobody went to the office that wasn't a vital employee. So that's management, the person I was dealing with, and that's pretty much it. It was a ghost town. I had never seen anything like it. Think of a bustling factory with nobody in it other than the office people. Not even the office people, the office managers. The office people had all gone home because they couldn't use any of their computers, and the managers were just sitting there on their phones waiting for us, really. They were just there to take up space at that point. They had done the calculations of how much it actually costs, and this was not including our bill that we sent them at the end of it, which I don't even remember the number on that one. But just having all of those people, you have 40 or 50 people making about $100,000 each per year, over the course of 1 week, not able to work. And if I can do my math pretty quickly here, $100,000 a year, divide that by 52, is going to be $2,000 per week. Times that by 50. You're at $100,000 in just labor alone. Now, the reason why it costs $400,000 is not because of that, but because of the lost profitability from work getting done, work going out, the friction that it put on relationships that they already had. And overall, they said it cost about $400,000. Now, I said, okay, after this whole thing gets resolved, I went back and visited them again and said, hey, look, we should probably talk about getting some services done. The craziest part about it is they still, after taking a $400,000 hit an hour, tens of thousands of dollars that we ended up charging them, still did not want to spend the $60,000 or $70,000 a year on tech support. Now, just that 1 week alone would have paid for tech support for the next probably about 5 years going. Obviously, if they grew, it probably would have adjusted a little bit, but the next 4 to 5 years, all would have been avoided. Now, I'm going through this similarly with a client right now. I don't do any tech support or anything like that, but he's having email issues and he's a personal friend. I'm dealing with it, but he is losing revenue every single day because he clicked on a malicious email. Had he just retained an IT company, it would have been so much easier for him to just call them up. They would have already put a filter on there, a spam filter, or anything else like that as far as antivirus goes, and he would have been fine. But that was $400,000 it cost this company, because not that they didn't understand the value, but they weren't willing to budge on it. I cannot believe it. I still can't believe that they don't want to sign up or didn't want to sign up at the time, and I don't believe they've ever signed up. But a $400,000 loss, and they were okay with taking that with 40 or 50 employees not working for a week and still getting paid their full paycheck, which is an astronomical amount of money. So if you've learned anything from this story, which I hope you have, try to just portray the importance of it. It don't come from a place of, I can't wait to get paid. Come from a place of, if you don't do this, how much could it potentially cost you? If all of your employees couldn't work for even 1 day, does that cover tech support for the whole year? And I'll give you one kind of little thought process that you can go through. If somebody makes $100,000 a year, right? We just went through that. 52 weeks in the year, it's about $2,000 per week. If that person doesn't work for 1 week of time, they have 40 hours worth of computer issues throughout the entire year. That's 1 hour per week, approximately, for the entire year. It could have just paid for tech support. And more than likely, they're probably going to have more than 1 hour of issues, especially if there's printers involved or phone systems involved. It just keeps getting more and more complex. If you're an MSP or an IT owner and you're struggling with, like, I don't understand how to sell the bigger accounts are the easiest ones, because that number then gets multiplied. Oh, you have 10 employees that are all making $100,000 a year? Or, yeah, that's $1 million in payroll. That's $2,000 per week. If your company went down for 1 week and you have 10 employees, do the math on that one. How much does that actually cost you? You don't have to use those numbers, but just use the numbers that of an employee working there. Take a wild guess. $30 an hour, $40 an hour, $100 an hour, $200 an hour, whatever that might be. Hey, if they don't work for 1 hour per month, your IT support is paid. I mean, that's how crazy it can actually get. So think about this as you're going out, as you're building out your proposals, as you're gearing up to pitch people, because that $400,000 mistake, which it still blows my mind that they didn't want to move forward with, could have easily been avoided if they just signed the proposal a couple weeks earlier. All the updates would have been done. All the patching would have been done. Antivirus would have been on the entire system. We would have known about it. It's seconds. We could have called the person, said unplug everything, and we would have just isolated that one computer, brought it back, wiped, reloaded, and been done with the entire process. But because they did not want to do that, now thank God they had bought offsite backup just a couple weeks prior from us, and that was the only thing that they wanted. But they would have avoided all of these problems had they just spent a little bit of money to avoid the massive headaches that come from it. So I hope this video helps. I hope you guys enjoyed this. And also, if you're thinking about, like, how do I kind of sell more stuff, you have to have a lot of this in place to get cybersecurity insurance for your business. You have to show that you are taking the right steps to prevent a disaster. And if you do, you could probably partner up with somebody that sells cybersecurity insurance and say, hey, by the way, I'll refer you as my main person. Could you do me a favor and refer me on some of your deals? You'd be surprised at how many people would be willing to say yes as long as they see your work. Other than that, I hope you guys found some value in this video. This is the craziest story. I don't ever want to relive it again, but it is something that lives near and dear to my heart. It was a pretty life-changing thing, and just to see somebody lose $400,000 in a week with employees, and kind of just the weirdest feeling going into an office where you knew nobody was happy and no work was getting done was chilling, to say the least. So love you guys. Good luck. And if you guys want to meet with me, link down below. Other than that, growth-generators.com. I'll see you guys later.